Hello, everybody. Welcome to this session on onboarding a historical company on the cloud journey. And we'll start by a poetry somehow, like a poem. Of course, we are still at a technical conference. We didn't change that. But if we take a step back, it's about a journey. A long-term journey. We can see the company as a voyager, and it had started a few hours ago, of course, at another scale, if you want. It's still ongoing, and it will take some more time to move on. But it's a nice journey. I believe most of us it's possible to have or eventually have it. And I'm here telling you this story, right? So the first is the introduction. My name is Marius Zaharia. I'm from France. But for those thinking that I don't have a French accent, this is true because I'm from Romania, actually. Moved to France. Working with Société Générale as Azure Cloud Lead. Société Générale is one of the largest banking and investment organizations in the world. It's based in France. And I'm also an Azure MVP and advisor working with French Azure community. We have Azure User Group France, which is very similar to the Finnish one, right? And you can follow me on Twitter, Le Campus Azure, and on LinkedIn, especially if you want. And the small print, these are my opinions and not my employer's ones. Okay, so let's go to the story. So we will establish some terms. First of all is the customer. The customer is a strategic company in the public transportation sector in France, one of the biggest ones. I won't give names, at least at the beginning. It's, I would say half NDA if you want. We'll keep it that way, okay? So it's an established public company in France for ages. Is these kind of companies that exist for many long time. It has a large coverage, and it's at the root of many other transportation companies, I would say. It's at the infrastructure for all this. Not necessarily IT infrastructure, but simply infrastructure. And now part of a consolidated group of other transportation companies, which are not exactly the same profile, maybe. They all part of what we call the group, right? The group will have an importance in our story. Okay, so this customer has an IT system. We are here about discussing about these IT systems rather than the companies themselves. A large number of applications, or technical or business applications. And the IT system includes many profiles as professions, mostly IT professionals, so infrastructure guys. Some of the tasks are outsourced, some of them are handled inside. And just a small point to identify some of the internal departments, because we'll speak about this kind of internal actors, because we'll interact with them during the speech. First of all is where we are, actually. We are inside the engineering operations and service department. This is where the things happen. It has two principal branches. One is the technical architecture, and the other one is networking. There are other things also. We'll speak about the innovation pole, which is a specific department that was created in order to drive innovation in the company. We'll speak about one particular department which concerns all of us, is the information security service. I believe all of us have this kind of entity inside our companies. They, of course, are responsible of the security of the whole information system. We have a production center and a build delivery center and other entities, internal entities. Speaking about IT infrastructure, we will speak also about data centers. And the customer has some large data centers, equivalent, if you want, as with the Azure regions. We have one at Lyon, one at Lille, which are big cities in France, by the way. The customers and the group's infrastructure networks got interconnected. But remember, this is a pretty heterogeneous structure, so having the network infrastructure interconnected is not as easy as I'm telling you that, right? However, there are various elements that still are different, they still need to be adapted, and what is also very important, there are differences in the governance and all the processes that are there, right? What is clearly at a high level for all of us, for all of them, if you want, are the security concerns and restrictions. Speaking about public transportation system, these are vital systems for the economy and for the living in a country. So it's very important, of course. We have some challenges, of course, and having this, evolution of the modern society, even in the classical sectors like the public transportation, there are revolutions coming. We speak about, at origin, of course, about trains, cars, buses, trams, I don't know, planes, of course, but we have different things coming like car sharing, for example, or different mobility systems that are interconnected and mixed, and so on. So these kind of things put our customer to encourage the innovation and the evolution of its system itself and of the enterprise itself. Having these innovation projects, they were definitely in challenge of using infrastructure for their projects, for their applications. They didn't have that in a timely manner. And so this was the initial need, right? How to deliver this kind of services, IT services for the innovation projects. Also, the internal organization, being historical, is not agile enough in order to react and deliver also services, not only infrastructure itself, okay? So we need to be time to market and cost effective, right? Things that are common sense for any enterprise, not necessarily a particular type of one. And the approach for that, the public cloud came into discussion pretty quickly, they took a look at the main actors, and the two actors stayed on the main list at the end. It was Azure with Microsoft and AWS with Amazon, of course. Rather in this order. There are different reasons for that. I won't enter a discussion right now. I wasn't part of this kind of decisions, but they preferred to go with Azure at the beginning, at least. And the point was, let's try and see how it works. And we don't know what cloud means, right? And how it could help us. Okay. There were two key factors in that at the beginning. The first of all was, I would say, I'll start with the last one, which was the openness of the CIO of the company, he was very open and open-minded, especially, and he encouraged a lot of this kind of evolution and experimenting with the cloud. And the second one is the security service was from the beginning involved. They were very committed to try new things from their security perspective, of course. But they really wanted to be at the middle of this evolution, which is not absolutely not evident, obvious in all the enterprises. right? But this was a bit of chance, if you want. And how that happened at the end. They actually, at the group level, they were convinced to buy an enterprise agreement and have Azure bought from Microsoft. And it started simply with a subscription. It was organized at the group level for the contract, but subscription was given to the customer itself in direct management. And the first team who started deploying things, so it was very strange, but the security service. They started really deploying first services in order to see how it works, and of course, from their perspective, what are the security challenges for that. The first point was, from the beginning, okay, if we go to the cloud, what will be our challenges? So they made several deployments, and they started making even infrastructure-related jobs, like putting in place a VPN connection. I wrote, was tempted, you'll see why. So the first learnings, there are different types of projects and applications. Some of them need to be interconnected with a core IT system. Other ones not. Totally opposite. They need to be isolated, separated, because they may induce risks. Okay. Then, at some point, pretty quickly actually, the advancement slowed down because, especially because the ISS team wasn't particularly qualified to work in Azure at that moment. Of course, you are here, you know that you need this kind of special competencies. And also the VPN was malfunctioning. Actually, they had difficulties to make it work. Just a side note, if you want, that in parallel, the group itself started to work on Azure on a separate subscription, and then other entities started to work. And they started to put in place an express route connection on that side. Okay? Okay, but we have here actually a separate VPN connection. There's no discussion about using that express route, and therefore there are different reasons for that. We will start discussing very soon about politics, so we'll stop then on this subject. But we have a site-to-site VPN, how to fix it, and then how to start organizing, classify projects, how to protect our system from being attacked, but in the same time leave the openness for experiment. And also give much more amplitude. There wasn't amplitude at that point, right? So the main service I spoke about, they engaged to initiate a dedicated Azure team. So it's the Azure AXP like experiment, right? And this team, this is a very, very important point. The team was attached directly to the chief of technical architecture, which was a highly staked position in the hierarchy. And that means, I'm telling that from the beginning, that all the small things stopping us from work in our organization were in some cases really bypassed by the technical architecture chief. He needed that to work, and he found a way to work. So we addressed it from the beginning to him directly. This is what was really special. And the team was nominated to be the armed arm of the innovation pole. Really, what better projects to give to the team to work that innovation projects, right? This was actually one of the reasons to put it in place. So it started with 2 people, Azure experts from external companies. And they was taken to work inside the customer's system. Knowledge in infrastructure, networking, security, and governance all at once. All the competencies needed. And it's not easy to find fastly Azure experts, at least in France today. There was I don't know how it's in Finland, if you have difficulties to find jobs, but I don't think so, right? not in this field. Okay, so I was part of that small team from the beginning. This is it wasn't said, but a bit obvious if you want. This is the position from which I'm telling you this story, actually. And the first thing was, let's start with the technical. And we need to fix something. We need to fix the VPN. And we put our hands inside, and yeah, we saw that actually the local Juniper appliance, which is the opposite of the VPN gateway from the Azure. It's the VPN gateway on-prem. Stopped working from time to time because there wasn't actually really activity at that point, and it stopped the connectivity because it didn't find a peer on the other side. So we set up that peer detection in local Juniper appliance. Actually, we didn't set up ourselves, but we discussed with the networking team. Look, in the Azure documentation, we found this that may help the VPN configuration. They put that in place, and actually it helped a lot. The VPN started working correctly. So this was the first thing. It was very good. We won the customer's confidence, right? It's very good. And the second thing, we started connecting to the first VM, and the first thing we saw, it's open bar, okay? Let's go to the internet and let's browse everything you want, like good and bad websites, I won't tell you. And definitely there was a security hole. And the first thing we did in order not to block completely the things, but at least find a way to solve them. We couldn't simply open to the internet without having control of what's happening, and we forced the tunneling. This is the configuration for forcing all the outbound connections from the machines through the VPN site to site. So all the communication went down and passed through the core IT proxies. And this way, the communications was controlled. Were controlled. Okay. The other point, interesting point, is that the networking team started playing very well, and we found a good way of cooperating, and it was crucial in these walks at the beginning. Okay, and now here come the politics. How many of you work with large companies, private companies, let's say? A good half. And how much of you work with large public companies? Very few. Okay. 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 So when we ask about large companies, it's that politics come into discussion very quickly. In public companies, but also in private companies. I work with both of them, and depending on the degree and the, I don't know, different specificities, but still. Why I'm talking about that? At this point, there was much enthusiasm in customers' position and findings. Yeah, we can go now straight to the cloud. And we'll have very quickly, we'll envision have production in the cloud. We will go in Azure, we'll have plenty of applications, and genius. Cool genius. Right? And here's the group coming. I mean, the group decision makers. And they say, you know something, there's not at all clear who will be responsible about the production workloads, because at the group level, we may decide to have it on our own responsibility, that all cloud workloads will be driven by the group itself. We have our own, imagine the group like the, central core, transversal IT services for a whole group of companies. Imagine that. So it's not like an empty group, but it's full of IT services. And there was really some kind of competition between these services. You'll find this kind of competition in all large companies. So they said, stop. You won't do any production thing in Azure, at least not now. Yeah, but what can we do? we started working. We cannot stop that. Okay, let's do some experiment-oriented things, okay? You'll do experiment. Okay, this is our responsibility, experiments. Yeah, okay. Well, that being said, we started to move on. Okay, and now we had some, like a very drafting. We had subjects to work on, but now we don't have a good control of what's happening in Azure. Yes, of course, we can have network security groups, but for all who use that, you know that it's only the first layer of security, and it's not something that you'll manage every day to add fine granular rules per application and all these kind of things. At least not from a classical IT system perspective. And the solution was to put in place two network virtual appliances in VAs. They choose Palo Alto because they had already experience with that in existing appliances. So we deployed to Palo Alto in Azure, and we used that. We put all the infrastructure around and routing. You'll see a schema a bit later about that. We put that in place in Azure. Now, the role was to, of course, to route, detect, and filter traffic per application basis, especially. But also there was a particular thing. So from the beginning, the goal for the experiment team was not to be stopped by anything when experimenting. This was the driver. This is why we were attached directly to the technical architecture chief. And this, when we started thinking about that, very soon the discussion came into play. Who will maintain this? Normally, is the regular networking infrastructure guy, the operation guy, right? But normally, in that company, for having one rule added, it used to take about 2 weeks, right? And it wasn't acceptable for us. So we decided, commonly with the whole teams involved, is that we decided that we will maintain, will operate ourselves directly the Palo Altos. Okay? We didn't know too much things about that. And what was the most sensitive? It was the installations and things. Okay, but the purely infrastructure part, like how to maintain the appliances infrastructure themselves, there was a combination of knowledge coming from the infrastructure guys, and also from two important things that are actually not written here. I should have written there. We had Azure Premier support, and when we bought the virtual appliances from the Azure Marketplace on pay-as-you-go. So when you have pay-as-you-go, you have all the Palo Alto support included at the premium level also. So this helped us actually several good times, and we put sometimes Microsoft and Palo Alto teams together work to solve our connectivity issues. So yeah, it could really work at the end. You have challenges, but it can work. And we learned how to manage these operations for Palo Alto devices. Okay, it's not so complicated at the end, but every rule was validated by the ISS team. And actually, from ISS team, we had one person who was detached to our team half time. And he was all the time involved to validate all the rules that we proposed to put in place for that application and that application. We designed the rules, but it was they who accepted, validated them. Okay? And more steps came. We need to have a frame of governance for that, right? How to organize projects, how to see them work well. We started drafting this. And now the team is ready to receive projects. So we started communicating on that internally, and there was already a pool of waiting projects in the innovation pool, and we took the first of them. They were qualified, and it was very simple at the beginning. We didn't take very complex things, right? We took one VM, one development VM to put in the cloud, then the second one, and maybe the third one was starting to be a 2 tiers application, okay? And, not so complicated things for us in Azure, but let's say that before having a VM in this system was something a matter of months, and now we deliver in days, so it's like an electrical shock. And so the news started to spread very quickly inside the company. And the interest increased rapidly. So we needed to be reinforced. So we added guys in the team, one by one. We estimated that we need more charge on that, and we added either from internal, but mostly from external resources. This is just a small graph, but there are much more projects on that. This is just to have a suggestion of the size of distribution of the projects, of the complexity. We do experiments in, of course, on PaaS, on containers, on appliances of different services like file sharing, and so on. That doesn't mean that tomorrow morning all the applications will use all these services, but this is the only way that they can assess the services. Okay? And we deploy projects, and then also for some of them we run them from the infrastructure perspective. And we became, I will say half-is with modesty, innovation drivers, okay? And we gain also some positioning within the group itself, because the news started spreading, and they also arrived to the group, okay? And they also say, why, that starts to be interesting. We can learn from each other, okay? So what kind of things are done? A lot of VMs hosting, which is basic, but once again, it may become very important for the projects. Simple projects with a pretty classical 2-tier, eventually 3-tier layering architecture, on which we do Azure infrastructure deployment and then software installation. And then a few complex projects with much more things to do and much more responsibility. And for example, apart these kind of things, we also had to deploy applications and to configure applications and to understand them, how to work, especially in the multi-containers context it was. So using Windows and Linux, especially Ubuntu in that case, using containers on Ubuntu, especially on the front end, and different platforms, development platforms, like you see .NET, ASP.NET, but also Java, a lot of Java. SQL Server, but a lot of Postgres as a replacement for Oracle, by the way. You may have seen that. And PHP, MySQL, and so on. And also for the application layer perspective, you see Tomcat, WordPress, but also Jupyter Notebooks and HD Insight for Hadoop. You see Kubernetes. There was a first wave of Kubernetes started, and now we speak much more about things like AKS, of course, but that moment we started with Kubernetes simply, as is. And then, of course, different infrastructure-specific product like Nginx, Traffic, but also Faveo, for example, is a business development, business-oriented development framework, I would say, helping to deploy applications very simply, not so complex architecture, but it helped a lot deploying features for the business teams, right? Okay, so remember that we had this kind of structuring of project types. First of all, the projects that need to be interconnected with the internal core information system, and the other ones who are rather purely really experiments, and also these kind of projects need to be connected with external partners, for example. They need to collaborate on that. So they need a common platform to work on, right? So the first zone is called intranet, and the second zone is called internet, okay? The first zone is interconnected with the internal system, and the second one is totally isolated. One other fact that separates and defines how to position a project is the classification of data. For low-level classification, the projects are accepted to go to internet and have this opportunity to experiment things or eventually or collaborate with external partners. But if the data is at higher level, it's totally forbidden to go there, and they should be deployed on an intranet zone. Of course, the questioning of how to collaborate with the partners came in place, and there were either answers like putting anonymous data for all the research, okay, which is totally acceptable, or eventually find other ways to include the partners in the core IT system via the classical things like give them an internal user and password and or an internal laptop and all things like that. It takes months, but this is it, okay. So the intranet zone is interconnected via IPsec VPN, and there's one mutualized subnet for single VMs in order not to consume subnets on that subnet. And we have this main VNet unstructured and several subnets. So we also have subnets eventually configured on purpose and one by one, depending on the size of the project. If we have medium-sized project, we can allocate the specific subnets to that. So the VNet is large and has pretty large address ranges available, and we allocated sparingly, right? There is the option of using deployments within VNets dedicated to the projects. And the peering works very well, no problem on that. But we saw that for this kind of projects, this kind of governance, if you want, there were two things that affected us with VNet peering. The first was that each new project attached to this peering needed much larger reconfiguration of the whole infrastructure system. It was much more impacted than we expected, because actually we have lots of routing rules because of the NVAs, right? And we need to add new routing rules for all the new ranges that come with these VNets that we attached, right? So these kind of things must be taken into consideration each time you take this decision, whether put it in separate VNet or not, and so on. And also, by the way, we saw, I would say, a side effect of using VNet peering. At some point in time, we looked at the costs, and we saw that for a particular VNet, the peering cost was higher than the compute cost. And this was because we had a Kubernetes cluster inside that, and it was so verbose. It set all the logs, all the things through the peering, and so it was really, it became expensive to pay the peering. So it was something like 1,500 per month, just the peering. It starts becoming interesting as price. Okay, so these kind of things, you see them when you work concretely with that. So here we have these two Palo Altos, and on the internet side, it's rather what you see for experiments like isolated networks, very separated within projects, and you have all their infrastructure deployed inside. Now, there was a challenge, of course, on that, because people need to connect to their VMs in the project. So they are outside the enterprise, and they don't have the way to connect on SSH or RDP through their laptops through the internet. It's not possible. The proxies don't let them. So we put in place jump VMs inside the intranet zone, and they connect to those jump VMs, and we had rules only opening for those IPs from their property, right? This is the schema for the intranet zone. This is the intranet zone, right? So we have, and I would say, this area, the perimeter of hybrid connection with the IPsec VPN. We have this in yellow, here in yellow, the project area. We have the different applications deployed in VMs or other services. Note that we speak a lot about IaaS right now, but yes, later in time, there were more and more projects that leveraged PaaS services but deployed in private infrastructure. Speaking about Hadoop, by the way, private cluster deployed in this with HD Insight. And to connect from the project to the core IT system if needed for integrating with the existing service, for example, or to expose this application to the user inside the core IT system, all passes through the first NVA, which manage all this internal private traffic, and all that goes to the internet or to the Azure services or other elsewhere, passes then to the second NVA, and it's him who managed all that internet rules. So we have this separation between the rules concerning the private network and all the rules concerning the public addresses. And then the zone, the management area and the area of jump machines, okay? Do you have any questions on that, by the way? And until now? Do you think it's logical what you see here, or is there something wrong? Don't be shy. If you have better models. So you're saying not to use an NVA for internal rules, right? And only use NSGs for that. This is what you're yeah. So, yeah. So I said before, NGAs are there, and they're definitely all around that. Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. So, what's happening? I don't push any button anymore. Okay, so the NGAs are everywhere around in all the subnets. They delimitate the perimeter of these subnets. Of course, that's for sure. Also on, for example, what particular thing was to say for the projects that were deployed inside the mutualized subnet, we tended at the beginning to put dedicated NGAs on the network cards themselves, because we have also this option. The thing is, actually at the end, it was easier and more practical to manage all these rules in the Palo Alto. So Palo Alto, at the end, it's not an NGA, it's much richer than that. We can compare today to Azure Firewall. I was expecting to ask this question, to have this question asked. And the answer to anticipate that is that at that moment there wasn't Azure Firewall existing. Now coming back to your question, still for the private networking, let's note that this area, which is the intranet zone, is still marked for the core IT system as an untrusted zone. And most of the large companies take the public cloud space, even the private one, as an untrusted zone. This is the reason why you do need to control perimeter on that. And actually, we did control many of things in the intranet NVA. There were, for each new application, we added new rules for giving access to via RDP to that VM or that VM. We simplified by using open HTTPS. This was at some point in time acted by the security that's okay to open HTTPS for everyone. This was okay for them. Maybe not for the production environment, maybe not for the, but from this context it was okay. But still we had rules to add for almost every new project. Any other question? Okay, let's move on. So speaking about the service catalog, we started to have one, right? Once again, we had lots of VMs of delivering. There was the setup of the environment itself, which included, of course, all the VMs, but also part of software inside the VMs, all the networking infrastructure, the routing if necessary, and so on. DNS, at the beginning, we used to request DNS records for the applications to the internal system. There was a service for that, but it was a pretty fast one, but not to our rhythm, I would say. Okay, so we want to have delegated completely a full zone of us. And there was something like, you see, experiment xp.something.fr, which was an intranet DNS address. But from this point, it's our subzone. It's us who manage that. So we deliver that in 5 minutes, right? This was with DNS, was at the beginning clearly a set of 2 DNS Windows machines. No discussion at all. But now everything's going to Azure Private DNS, which is a very good option. Okay? Then we had to deploy things. Of course, Azure, all resources on Azure, but also jobs of building container images for different applications. So we had, for example, accesses to some repositories, and they gave us, it was the job of the applications to give us all the necessary things, even the Docker file and all the structure needed to build the containers. And then the deployment, so this is some like a shared responsibility, we build them for them, but the deployment was completely on our responsibility. They didn't have a handoff for the deployment. And the governance, of course, we had backup and monitoring, knowing that it's an experiment environment. We didn't have too high SLA requirements. So this wasn't a high focus at this moment. Still, we had in mind that we should deliver at least a good backup for applications, and we used systematical Azure backup, and we used for essential monitoring, log analytics, Azure Monitor and log analytics, classical things. And then we behave also as an integrator. You see, when you need services from other parts, it happens that we have learned how to work with them. For example, the certificates service, internal one. They were nice guy, no problem with that. But the procedure was pretty complex. And it took time to learn. There was a parameter missing. You had to fill in that name, and the form was like this, and so on. We learned how to do that. We did that several times for our customers, and then we said, why don't we do that for our customers? And because each time they come, nobody knows how to request a certificate. Okay, we'll do that for them. What do you need for? We know already the questions that will be asked, and this was part of our integrator offer. Okay, we did that we were the entry point for the applications, and we took all this onboarding for each application very seriously, and we helped them a lot with this methodical onboarding. So what meant maybe half of the job was ours from pure responsibility perspective, but the rest helped a lot them. Okay, and also, at least at the beginning, the consulting part shouldn't be avoided and taken as low priority, because at least at the beginning, the people don't know anything about the cloud. So even at the application level, you need to help them. Yeah, there's an app service there. And even if it's not my job at the end, you have an application, it's your job how to run it and what's the components for your application. Yes, there's one. There's a, we can do containers because there's a nice AKS cluster, and you can do, I don't know, databases. Everyone comes and asks, can I have a VM to run my Postgres machine? Yeah, but there's a Postgres as a service, and you don't run anything. So I can deploy your machine for you, but remember that when you want to adjust something on your database performance, I call you, because I don't know how do you really want to adjust your cluster and your DBA role come into place. Yeah, but I don't really want to be called for any kind of things like that. Okay, let's take a PaaS service then. It's simpler to adjust, to manage, and especially to patch, because you don't need that. Yeah, so this is our consulting role in that. What are other parts of our agile approach and our flexible approach? Industrialization is absolutely mandatory. We were still a very small team, and you cannot cover all this without leveraging all these automation bricks. Of course, ARM templates. I would say today Terraform, because I didn't use Terraform at that moment. I think it is pretty well applicable in this kind of infrastructure. We use Packer for standardizing OS images, and also CI/CD with Visual Studio Team Services at that moment. Of course, meanwhile, it was renamed as Azure DevOps, and especially, as I said, on the container part. And Packer was also automatically built with Azure DevOps. Okay, who knows what is a linked template? Hands. Okay. So for those who don't know, is a way of decomposing ARM templates in order to have it like a component. So you make a link inside another template, and this way you can make small parts like, I don't know, a set of VM scale set with a load balancer maybe, say like this. And this is something that you can repeat for each application. Maybe with the database behind, if you have this pattern of 2-layer with Postgres behind, you take it okay, so now you have maybe the first part, which is the front end, and the second one, which is the back end, separated in linked templates. And you reference these ones in the final template for your application. This is very practical. And we started from, of course, from Quick Start template, which is the public GitHub repository from Microsoft at the origin. But we evolved lots of them, and yeah, it's very nice. Okay, okay. This is an example of JSON file. Yes, let's move on. I have 10 minutes left, I think. Okay, So what services from Azure we got used? Of course, ARM, Azure VMs. Not many sizes. We encourage a lot projects to standardize their choices because it's simpler for everyone. Of course, you may have need of special things like AI machines, and in that case, it can be justified, but still, we try to standardize the sizes. Networking with of course, we discussed about all this networking structure with NSGs and user-defined routes. Of course, if you put NVAs, you need to specify a lot of routing, and this is a sensitive part, actually, of it. For the internet zone, all default routing were overridden. And at that moment, there was Azure Container Service used with Kubernetes. Today, I would say simply go AKS, no hesitation. And of course, individual containers would be ACI, Azure Container Instance, but also you can use ACI as an infinite node within AKS, which is an awesome thing. Okay, of course, Azure Container Registry, you cannot do containers without having a registry, and Azure Container Registry was a very structural part of it. It wasn't so obvious to see it, but yes, it was a structural part because we were in a private environment and the images were private. We spoke about Palo Alto, Azure Active Directory, of course. Very useful that it was already synchronized from the group level, so we inherited actually the same tenant, and we used all the identities there. All the people were already there, so we had reused these kind of things for habilitating on applications. Now, this is also there's also a caveat on that because we don't have hands-on the global tenant in that case. So the solution is sometimes to create a separate tenant and to invite people from the other tenant to join. And this tenant we can manage in that case. Azure Backup, as I said, log analytics, app service domains for certificates. Okay, this was especially for public certificates, Azure DNS, Azure Automation, classical things if you want. Azure File Share, File Sync, it was a very interesting case for them. Governance, project onboarding and management. And this is about what I've told you a few slides ago, that there was a nice process put in place for that. When I say nice, I mean not huge and heavy. Nice being agile. And there are two things. First of all, having a flexible process in order to adapt it quickly for different sizes and types of projects. Remember that we had very various types of projects. And the second is that, you see, there was a... Why do I still press the wrong button? Yes, here, yes. You see, we have this step of onboarding. So I think it's not the only place where I applied this approach, especially in large companies. Having a pre-sales approach it may be really, really practical. And have this approach like the other one is your customer, really. Even if it's an internal one. It helps a lot of having this attitude. Of course, being from the consultancy at origin, it helps. I already used to answer to plenty of RFIs, and that helps a lot to actually define this kind of onboarding pre-process to see what are their requirements, what they do really need, what is the good response for them, what is the good solution architecture for them if needed, and then have all the information gathering around to at the end have an official response which is yes or not. We can host you or not, and if yes, it will take that time. So this approach helped a lot, even if we are in a public company, if we are inside a company, it's a very good approach from my perspective. And then it's all implementation part, not to be reduced because it's important. We had all these steps well segmented, what to do, how to configure, build, deploy, how to request third-party services, and at the end aggregate all the response in order for the customer, for the client, to have a single coherent answer and say, you have your application, this is the address where you access it, this is the procedure, and so on and so on. Okay? And then, don't forget that all applications have a life cycle. From our perspective, which was a perspective of experiments, the project wouldn't live for life. So we need to follow them and see, is it your project done? Can we free your resources? And so on. This is important to following and unprovisioning. Okay, and of course there was the tooling used, and we did patches, updates, and so on. We used a lot Azure DevOps for work, build, release. We used Planner for tasking, follow-up, simple, practical, but well organized at the end by different categories. Of course, all the Microsoft Office cloud infrastructure is very practical to integrate all these as tooling, and it existed. And Azure DevOps, we used it internally for our own processes. The team was pretty small at the beginning. As you see, the team lead, the project manager, an infrastructure architect, a system engineer. We have associated security expert from outside, and a technical architect from outside also. I also found that in other companies. This is a pretty classical template of team. And we use an adaptation of Scrum methodology, actually, at the end, even if we didn't develop products in sprints. But we did get organized by sprints in order to commit ourselves to deployments. And we planned different deployments of the projects by sprints. Okay? And the epics were the projects. And actually, we had two big epics. The projects, and then structured by features. The projects were the features. And we had also a big epic, which was our internal backlog to evolve the platform itself. Okay? So the next step is that a new team is built and is running, actually, with the new roles, like the owner of the service catalog itself, responsible for selling, actually, to all other entities. A big focus on ops, moving to the production step by step. This is something that is gained, like, once again, without speaking too much about that. But this is how it works at the end. You gain confidence, then you run it naturally. And then you officialize all that. Okay? QA lead, and expanding a lot things existing like a system engineer or DevOps, cloud architect, and things like that. And more responsibilities on more projects, more production-oriented, richer cloud offering. Okay? And more services delivered, moving to PaaS serverless and things like that, as well as much as the maturity of the company accept that. Okay, and speaking back about this specific organization, it was the group, so all this helped to go to a synergy and have these positions unified within the group, which is very important from the infrastructure perspective, moving step by step, organizing, moving to the express route infrastructure, which is much better, of course, but we need to do that while still being agile and independent, not dependent on those infrastructure teams, okay? And sharing the knowledge. And speaking on sharing the knowledge is the diffusion of the culture of the cloud and the agility within the company. This is essential. What you do every day is spread naturally. It's heard all about. And how do you work every day? It's something that is important, it's listened, and you gain much more by what you do than what you say, of course. But we really saw these things that we didn't do particular things to have this, for example, success of particular steps of agility propagated because they saw that it works in our team. They started taking it in other teams. Okay? So as a conclusion, the cloud is not anymore a taboo subject, even in the public sector. Yeah, I can confirm more and more companies in the public domain go to that. It is an innovation driver. No discussion on that. And the cloud, this is not so obvious that it seems, for us here maybe, but the cloud may be the way, the driver for the adoption of DevOps and agility in the company. Okay? Take that as, don't speak about it like this, huh? Just do the cloud, and this will drive things behind. Okay? So, there's no success in the cloud without a strong technical competency, without the maturity and experience, and without a real team in place, acting as a team. Thank you.